15 minutes before my daughter was supposed to walk down the aisle, I was standing alone in a small room behind Ebenezer AME Chapel, staring at myself in a mirror that made every wrinkle on my face look deeper than it had that morning. The tuxedo fit better than I expected. Not perfectly, but good enough. The jacket pulled a little across my shoulders because 40 years of electrical work had left me with the kind of arms that did not know how to disappear neatly into formal clothes. My shoes were polished, my beard was trimmed. I had even let my sister Laverne talk me into getting my eyebrows cleaned up because, according to her, "Lawrence, this is your baby's wedding, not a hardware store run." I had laughed when she said it. Now I wish she was standing there so I would not have to be alone with my own reflection. Outside the door, the church was alive with wedding noise. Florists rushing through the hallway, bridesmaids laughing too loudly because they were nervous. Somebody testing a microphone in the sanctuary, the organist playing the same opening notes over and over again, like he was warming up his fingers in the whole building at the same time. I touched the silver chain around my neck. Rochelle's wedding ring rested against my chest under the white shirt. I had worn it there for 28 years. "Well, baby," I whispered, looking toward the ceiling like she might be watching from somewhere just above those old church beams. "Our girl is really getting married." My phone buzzed in my pocket. I smiled before I even looked. 3 decades of fatherhood will do that to a man. Your child calls. You answer before your mind catches up. Your child texts on her wedding day. You assume she needs something small, maybe a tissue, maybe a bottle of water, maybe one more reminder that her mother would have been proud. The message was from Maya. "Dad, don't walk me down the aisle. Terrence's family would be ashamed to see you." For a few seconds, I honestly thought my eyes had rearranged the words. I adjusted my glasses. I read it again. "Dad, don't walk me down the aisle. Terrence's family would be ashamed to see you." The hallway noise kept moving. The church kept breathing. Somewhere a woman laughed. Somewhere a door opened and closed. Inside me something went perfectly still. I stood there in that rented tuxedo with my thumb hovering over the screen while 31 years of life came back to me in pieces. Maya at 3 years old, sitting on the bathroom counter while I tried to part her hair straight with hands that were better at stripping wire than braiding curls. Maya at 6, asleep across my chest in Children's Hospital after the pneumonia fever finally broke. Maya at 9, holding a softball trophy with a missing front tooth and grass stains on both knees. Maya at 17, standing in the kitchen with college acceptance letters spread across the table, while I pretended not to calculate how many overtime calls I would need to take. Maya at 24, crying in my driveway after her first real heartbreak, sitting in the passenger seat of my old Ford while I drove around Columbus for 2 hours because she said she could not be still. Maya this morning, beautiful in the bridal suite, pressing a kiss to my cheek and saying, "Don't cry too early, Daddy. You'll mess up your pictures." I almost laughed at that memory, almost. Rochelle died when Maya was 3. Cancer does not care how young a family is. 1 month we were arguing gently about preschool options and whether we could afford new living room furniture. The next I was standing beside a hospital bed listening to my wife tell me where she kept Maya's birth certificate, the good insurance papers, and the recipe for sweet potato pie because she knew I would burn the first 3 if she did not write it down. "Raise her soft, Lawrence," Rochelle told me. I remember that better than anything. Not strong, not successful, not impressive, soft. She knew the world would ask enough hardness from our daughter. She wanted our house to be the place Maya could breathe. So that was what I tried to build. I worked as an electrician all over Columbus. Houses, grocery stores, churches, warehouses, restaurants that called at midnight because their freezer had died and they were about to lose $6,000 in food. I crawled through attics in July. I knelt in basements in January. I took emergency calls on holidays. I learned which grocery store sold the hair beads Maya liked, which teacher needed extra paperwork, which cough meant a cold, and which cough meant we were going to urgent care. I missed sleep. I did not miss her life, at least not the parts I could help. When Maya needed braces, I picked up weekend work. When she wanted dance lessons, I rewired a barber shop after my regular shift. When she needed college money, I sold the motorcycle I had kept in the garage for 10 years and barely ridden since Rochelle got sick. When she called from her first apartment because the kitchen outlet sparked, I drove across town with my tools still in the truck. And when she told me she was marrying Terrence Bellamy, I shook that young man's hand and meant it when I said, "Welcome to the family." Terrence was polite at first. Polished, that was the word for him. He had a smooth kind of confidence, the kind a man gets when nobody has ever questioned whether he belonged in a room. He called me Mr. Freeman, looked me in the eye, asked about my work, laughed at my old jokes even when they did not deserve it. Maya glowed around him. That was enough for me to try. Then I met his parents. Camille and Vernon Bellamy lived in a brick house in Bexley, with columns out front and a driveway so clean I felt guilty parking on it. Camille greeted me at the door in a cream-colored dress that looked simple until you knew enough to understand it was not. Vernon shook my hand with both of his and smiled like a man who had practiced being gracious for committees, donors, and church banquets. They were not unkind. That would have been easier. They were careful. Camille looked at my old Ford parked near the curb and said, "Now that truck has history." The way she said history made it sound like something that belonged in a museum display behind glass. At dinner, she asked whether I was still in the trades after retirement. When I said I took a few small jobs for old customers, she nodded and said, "It's wonderful when a man keeps busy with his hands." There was nothing to object to, not directly. But by the time dessert came, I knew exactly where I stood. Not beneath them, because I never believed God made me beneath anybody. Just outside the picture they had already framed in their minds. After that dinner, Maya started changing small things. "Dad, maybe park around the side next time," she said one evening after we left the Bellamy house. "Camille is particular about curb appeal." "Curb appeal? You know what I mean." I did. Another time she called and asked if I still had the navy suit I wore to Deacon Holmes's funeral. "I do," I said. "Why?" "I was thinking maybe for the rehearsal dinner, you could rent something newer. The suit is clean." "I know. I just want the pictures to look nice." Pictures. That word started showing up everywhere. Pictures with the Bellamy side. Pictures at the country club. Pictures in front of the old chapel doors. Pictures where my shoes mattered, my truck mattered, my watch mattered. The calluses on my hands somehow mattered. I told myself Maya was stressed. Weddings turn reasonable people into accountants of table linens and floral arrangements. I told myself she was trying to keep peace. I told myself Camille Bellamy was not the first polished woman to confuse presentation with character, and she would not be the last. Then Maya asked me to rent a tuxedo instead of wearing the suit I had planned. "It'll look better beside Terrence's father," she said. She caught herself after she said it. But words do not go back into your mouth just because your face realizes what they mean. I rented the tux. The young salesman measured my shoulders while telling me weddings were expensive. "Son," I said, "you do not know the half of it." I had paid for half the venue deposit, the string quartet, the rehearsal dinner, the photographer's second shooter, and something called a champagne wall that made no sense to me, but made Maya happy. I did not complain. A father gets one daughter. At least I did. I never imagined the tuxedo would not be the thing that did not belong. Back in that church room, I read the message one more time. "Dad, don't walk me down the aisle. Terrence's family would be ashamed to see you." My thumb moved over the keyboard. I typed one word. "Okay." Then I pressed send. That was all. No speech. No question. No begging my own child to remember who I was. I put the phone in my pocket, closed my hand over Rochelle's ring, and walked toward the door. For 31 years, I had thought walking my daughter down the aisle would be one of the hardest and happiest things I would ever do. I never imagined walking away from that aisle would be quieter. The hallway outside the room was busy enough that nobody stopped me. A young man carrying a camera bag brushed past and said, "Excuse me, sir," without looking up. Two bridesmaids hurried the other way, holding their dresses off the floor. The wedding coordinator was speaking into a headset near the vestibule, nodding like she could control time by nodding hard enough. I walked through all of it. At the entrance to the sanctuary, I stopped. On the first pew, a white card rested against the aisle seat. Father of the bride. Gold letters. Perfect script. I picked it up and ran my thumb over the raised print. For 1 second, I let myself see the life I thought I was about to live. Maya slipping her arm through mine. The organ swelling, me leaning close enough to whisper, "Your mother would be shouting by now." Maya laughing through tears. Terrence waiting at the front with a face full of gratitude instead of calculation. Then I set the card back in its place, straight, centered, waiting for a man who was not coming. The June sun hit my face when I stepped outside. My right knee complained before I reached the truck. It had never been the same since surgery 3 years earlier. Most mornings, a few careful steps loosened it. That afternoon, it felt like even my body knew something had been pulled out of alignment. I climbed into the Ford and sat with both hands on the wheel. My phone buzzed once. Then again. I did not look. For 31 years, whenever Maya called, I answered. If she locked her keys in her apartment, I came. If she needed help moving a couch up 3 flights of stairs, I came. If she got sick and wanted soup from the little place near campus, I came. If she cried, I came. That day I started the engine. The old truck rumbled like it had somewhere to be. I drove away from Ebenezer AME Chapel while the music was still warming up inside. There was only one place I wanted to go. Alum Creek Lake. Rochelle and I used to drive there before Maya was born. We did not have money for much, but we could afford turkey sandwiches wrapped in wax paper, a bag of chips, and lemonade from the grocery store. We would sit on the same wooden bench under a maple tree and talk about the future like young people do when they have not yet learned that the future can change its mind. I had not gone there much after she died. Some places hold memory gently. Others hold it by the throat. That afternoon, the lake was quiet. A retired couple walked slowly along the trail. Two fishermen argued about bait with the cheerful seriousness of men who had nowhere better to be. A little boy skipped rocks and cheered for himself every time one made it past a single hop. Life kept moving without asking my permission. I parked beneath the maple tree. The bench was still there. Older. So was I. I reached into the inside pocket of my tuxedo jacket and took out the folded speech I had spent nearly 3 weeks writing. Blue ink covered both sides of the pages. Some sentences were crossed out. Some had been rewritten after midnight when the house was quiet, and Rochelle's picture on the mantel seemed to be listening. I unfolded the paper. There was no reception hall, no microphone, no guests waiting to laugh or cry. Just the water, the wind, and a pair of ducks gliding past like they had no interest in human heartbreak. I cleared my throat. My beautiful Maya. My voice broke on her name. I started again. My beautiful Maya. When your mother died, I did not know if I was strong enough to raise you by myself. Every morning, though, you would wake up, look at me, and say one word. Daddy. That one word gave me another reason to get out of bed. I stopped. My glasses had fogged. I took them off, wiped them with the corner of my shirt, and sat there with the paper trembling in my hand. After a while, I kept reading. I spent years trying to teach you that kindness matters more than money. Character matters more than appearance. Showing up matters more than saying the perfect thing. I know I made mistakes. Every parent does. But I hope when life tests you, you remember you were raised in a house where love did not need to impress anybody. The breeze lifted one corner of the page. I folded the speech before I reached the ending. Some words were not ready to be spoken anymore. Across town, as I later learned, Ebenezer AME Chapel began to realize something was wrong. At first, nobody panicked. Weddings almost never start on time. Somebody blamed traffic. Somebody else blamed the florist. The organist repeated the processional twice, then 3 times. Maya called. My phone vibrated against the bench. Her picture appeared on the screen. She was 22 in that photo, wearing a cap backward on college graduation day, her arm wrapped around my shoulders like she still thought I could hold up the whole world if she needed me to. I watched it ring until it stopped. 5 seconds later, it rang again. Then again. After that came the text. Dad, where are you? Please answer. Dad, this isn't funny. I turned the phone face down beside me. The ducks did not mind. Back at the church, the wedding coordinator checked the groom's room, the lobby, the side hallway, the parking lot. Nothing. Terrence stood near the front entrance, adjusting his tie over and over. "Has anyone seen Mr. Freeman?" he asked. No one had. Camille Bellamy folded her arms and said, "I'm sure he'll be back." From what Vernon told me later, she sounded more inconvenienced than worried, as if my absence was a delay in a program she had worked hard to design. 5 more minutes passed. Guests began whispering. "I thought the ceremony started at noon. Is the bride all right? Maybe something happened." Camille lowered her voice and said to Terrence, "If he does not return, you can walk Maya yourself." Terrence stared at her. "What? People do not have to know. They absolutely will. It does not have to become a scene." Terrence rubbed his forehead. "My future father-in-law disappearing minutes before the wedding is already a scene." At the lake, I put the speech back in my jacket pocket and closed my hand around Rochelle's ring. "I tried," I whispered. "I really did." A little boy nearby dropped his fishing pole into the shallows. His grandfather laughed, rolled up one sleeve, and helped him pull it out. The boy looked embarrassed for half a second, then relieved. The old man never made him feel foolish. He just stayed beside him. I wondered if I had spent so many years protecting Maya from disappointment that she had never learned what disappointment cost somebody else. That thought hurt worse than the text. My phone buzzed again. This time the caller ID surprised me. "Vernon Bellamy?" I let it ring once, twice. Then I answered. "Hello." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Vernon sighed. "Lawrence." "Vernon." "I figured you might be at the lake." I looked out over the water. "Maya told you about it?" "Years ago," he said. "She said it was where you and Rochelle used to go." His voice sounded different than I had ever heard it. Less polished, more like an older man who had finally run out of room to hide behind manners. "I will not waste your time," he said. "I owe you an apology." I rested my elbows on my knees. "For what?" "For not stopping this before today?" The wind moved through the leaves above me. "What exactly are you apologizing for?" The pause that followed told me the answer was not simple. Back at the church, Camille was trying to regain control. Vernon told me later that she pulled Terrence aside near the vestibule and said, "Listen to me." "I'm listening," he said. "We have nearly 200 guests waiting." "I know. So we adapt." "Adapt how?" "You escort Maya yourself." "No." Camille looked at him like she had not understood the word. "What do you mean, no? People know her father was here." "Was here," Camille corrected. "They'll ask questions." "Then tell them he became ill." "I'm not lying." "It is not lying if it protects the day." Terrence looked toward the sanctuary where guests were already shifting in their seats. "I think the day is past protecting," he said. On the phone, Vernon inhaled slowly. "Camille started talking about appearances months ago," he told me. "I guessed that." "No," he said. "I do not think you guessed how far it went." Then he told me how Camille complained that my truck would be visible in outdoor photos if I parked near the chapel entrance. How she suggested that the photographer get more formal family groupings with the Bellamy side before including me. How she told Maya that my hands looked too rough for close-up shots with the bouquet. How she made comments about shoes, posture, table placement, the father-daughter dance, the way I said grace at the rehearsal dinner. Small things, little cuts, each one easy to dismiss by itself. Together they made a wound. "I argued with her," Vernon said. "I believe you. But not enough." I did not answer, because he was right. "What about Terrence?" I asked. Vernon did not hesitate. "He should have defended you." "Did he?" "No, he said he did not want conflict before the wedding." I gave a sad little laugh. "What?" Vernon asked. "Conflict came anyway." Neither of us laughed after that. Inside the bridal suite, Maya paced in circles. I learned this later from Laverne, who got the story from one of the bridesmaids. Maya kept saying, "This does not make sense. He always answers." One bridesmaid asked carefully, "Did you two argue?" "No," Maya said. Another asked, "Did you say anything that might have upset him?" Maya stopped walking. "No." The answer came too fast. Everyone in that room heard it. Maya reached into the small pocket sewn inside her dress and pulled out her phone again. The last message thread stared back at her. The message she had convinced herself was practical, temporary, necessary, something to get through for the sake of the day. She had expected me to be hurt, maybe angry, maybe embarrassing. She had not expected me to simply accept what she asked for. Vernon spoke again through my phone. "Lawrence, I'm here. I need you to hear something. Go ahead." Camille pushed this. I waited. Terrence allowed it. Another pause. But Maya sent the message. The words settled over me like a cold rain. Not because I did not already know, because hearing another man say it made the truth impossible to soften. For years I had found excuses whenever Maya disappointed me. She is stressed, she is young, she is busy, she is grieving in ways she cannot name. She is trying to belong, but nobody else had held that phone. Nobody else had typed those words. Nobody else had pressed send. "I will not blame everyone else for her choice," Vernon said. "I appreciate that. I am ashamed of my family today." I looked down at Rochelle's ring resting in my palm. So am I. The church might have limped forward if the truth had stayed hidden. It did not. One small mistake changed everything. Maya's maid of honor, Keisha, stepped into the hallway with another bridesmaid. Keisha had taken a screenshot of Maya's message earlier because Maya had asked, "Do you think this is too harsh?" Keisha meant to send it privately to Aunt Patrice for advice. She opened the thread in a hurry, attached the screenshot, typed, "What do I even say to her now?" and pressed send. A second later, her face went white. "Oh no. What?" "I sent it to the Freeman family group." Not Aunt Patrice. Everyone. Aunts, uncles, cousins, family friends. The same people sitting in the sanctuary, waiting to watch me walk Maya down the aisle. Within seconds, phones across the church began vibrating. People looked down, read, then slowly looked toward the bridal suite. Near the second row, Laverne covered her mouth. "Oh, Maya," she whispered. Beside her, Uncle Clyde removed his glasses and stared at the screen, like maybe the words would change if he looked long enough. A cousin from Dayton said, "Please tell me this is not real." No one answered. There it was. No rumor, no misunderstanding, no twisted version. Just my daughter's words. "Dad, don't walk me down the aisle. Terrence's family would be ashamed to see you." One of Rochelle's older church friends stood without realizing how loud her voice carried. After everything that man did for her. Silence spread through the sanctuary. It was not angry at first. That would have been easier to fight. It was disappointed. Some of the Bellamy guests saw the screenshot too. They shifted in their seats, exchanged uncomfortable glances, looked away from Camille. Even people who knew nothing about our family knew enough. No father deserved that. Maya finally stepped out of the bridal suite. Her dress shimmered under the church lights. Her hair was perfect. Her makeup was perfect. Her veil fell behind her like something from a magazine. She looked exactly like the bride she had dreamed of becoming. Then she saw the room. Conversation stopped. People were not searching for me anymore. They were looking at her, not with hatred, not even with judgment, with disbelief. For the first time that day, Maya understood that everyone knew why her father was gone. The wedding did not explode. It collapsed quietly. That was almost worse. Nobody threw anything. Nobody shouted. Nobody made a movie scene in the aisle. People simply began standing in small groups. A cousin whispered to his wife and guided their children out through the side door. Laverne gathered her purse, her wrap, and every bit of dignity she could carry for our family, then walked past the bridal suite without looking in. An older gentleman from the Bellamy side cleared his throat and said, "Maybe we should give them some privacy." Within 10 minutes, the sanctuary was half empty. Maya stood in her wedding dress watching guests leave a ceremony that had never begun. Terrence came up beside her. "What did you send him?" he asked. She turned to him. "You saw it?" "I saw what everyone saw." His voice was low but sharp. "Why would you write it like that?" Maya stared at him. "Why would I write it like that?" "That's not what I meant." "Then say what you meant." He glanced toward the remaining guests. "Not here." Maya laughed once. There was no humor in it. "Now you care where things happen." His jaw tightened. "My mother did not type that message." "No," Maya said. "She just made sure I believed it." Terrence did not answer. That silence told her more than any apology could have. The man she had tried so hard to protect would not even protect her when the whole room was watching. I got home a little after 3. The house looked exactly the same as it had that morning. Small ranch on the west side of Columbus. Trim that needed repainting. One porch step I kept meaning to replace. 2 empty hooks where hanging baskets Maya had given me for Father's Day used to hang. I sat in the truck before going inside. My knee had stiffened during the drive, and when I climbed down, pain shot up the outside of my leg. "Well," I muttered, gripping the doorframe. "Happy wedding day to me." Dry humor is what men my age use when tears are too close. Inside, I removed the tuxedo jacket and hung it carefully over the back of a kitchen chair. Old habits. You take care of things, even rented things. I loosened the bow tie, pulled it free, and set it beside the folded speech on the table. The house was quiet, not peaceful, just quiet. I changed into a soft flannel shirt and jeans faded at the knees. My body seemed to recognize them before my heart did. In the bathroom cabinet, I found the pain reliever, shook 2 tablets into my palm, and swallowed them with tap water. Then, for reasons that made no sense, I made coffee. It was late afternoon. I knew it would keep me awake. I made it anyway. While the coffee maker sputtered, I stood in the living room looking at the old bookshelf. On the bottom shelf sat a cardboard photo box with one bent corner. I had not opened it in months, maybe years. I carried it to the couch and set it on my lap. The lid came off with a soft scrape. There were whole decades inside that box. Maya in pink pajamas holding a stuffed rabbit by one ear. Maya asleep on my chest after a fever broke. Maya on the first day of kindergarten, one hand gripping her backpack strap and the other gripping mine. Then I found the softball picture. 8 years old. Missing front tooth. Grass stain on her pants. Plastic trophy clutched against her chest like it was made of gold. And me standing behind her in a work shirt with drywall dust on the sleeves. Electrical tape sticking out of my pocket. Hair still dark then. I remembered that day clearly. A panel job had run long on the north side. I drove across town with dust in my eyebrows and changed shirts in the parking lot, only to realize I had forgotten the clean one. So I stood there dirty, and Maya did not care. She ran to me anyway. "Daddy, did you see it?" I saw the whole thing. I had missed the first 3 innings, but I saw her hit that double. That had been enough for her. I held the picture in both hands, and that was when I finally cried. Not loud, not hard. One tear first, then another. I did not cry because I missed walking her down the aisle. I cried because I understood something I should have understood years earlier. I had taught my daughter that I would always absorb the hurt. No matter what she said, no matter how far she pushed, no matter who she became around other people, Dad would still come. Dad would still fix it. Dad would still stand there smiling so she would not have to feel guilty. That was my mistake. Love had turned into permission, and I had handed it to her with both hands. The sun went down slowly. The coffee turned bitter in the mug. I did not turn on the television. I did not answer the phone. Maya called 17 times. Terrence called twice. Vernon sent one text. "I am sorry. Truly." I read that one. I did not answer. At 9:17 p.m., headlights swept across my living room wall. A car door closed. Footsteps crossed the porch. Slow, unsteady, then a knock. "Dad." Maya's voice cracked on that one word. I stood in the hallway with my hand against the wall. Another knock. "Dad, please open the door." I moved toward the front window and looked through the narrow gap in the curtain. She was still wearing the dress. The hem was dirty now, gray from pavement and church steps, and whatever else she had walked through after her perfect day collapsed. Her makeup had run beneath both eyes. Her veil was gone. Her shoulders shook. She did not look like a bride anymore. She looked like my little girl after a bad dream. "Dad," she said again, softer. "Please." My hand went to the lock. Every old instinct in me woke up at once. Open the door. Bring her inside. Make coffee. Tell her people make mistakes. Tell her tomorrow will be better. Tell her Daddy is here. Then I saw my phone on the side table, and I remembered the words. "Terrence's family would be ashamed to see you." My hand stayed on the lock. I closed my eyes. I'm sorry, baby, I whispered. Then I stepped back. Maya knocked once more. I reached over and switched off the porch light. Through the curtain, I watched her shoulders drop. For a long time, she stood there in the dark. Then she slowly sat down on the porch step of the house where she had always been forgiven. This time, the door stayed closed. The first thing I heard Saturday morning was the creak of my porch swing. For a second, I forgot what day it was. Then I opened my eyes and remembered everything. The wedding, the text, the church, the empty house. The clock on my nightstand read 6:40. For most of my life, I had been an early riser. Retirement had not changed that. My body still believed there was work waiting somewhere. I pulled on my slippers and looked through the front window. Maya was asleep on the porch swing. The wedding dress was wrinkled beyond saving. Her hair had fallen loose around her shoulders. Morning dew had settled along the hem. She looked cold. She looked exhausted. She looked 31 years old. And somehow, for just a second, she also looked 3. I stood there longer than I should have. Every father knows that feeling. The part of you that wants to erase your child's pain never really goes away. But another part of me had finally learned something the day before. If I rescued her again, she would never understand why she was hurting. I walked quietly into the kitchen. The coffee maker clicked on with the familiar sound it had made almost every morning for 15 years. 2 mugs, not 1. I was not ready to forgive her, but I was not going to pretend she was not my daughter. When the coffee finished, I carried both cups outside. The screen door squeaked. Maya stirred. She blinked against the morning light and sat up slowly, confused for half a second about where she was. Then she saw me. Her eyes filled immediately. Morning, I said. My voice sounded calmer than I felt. I placed 1 mug on the small table beside the swing. She wrapped both hands around it without drinking. I'm sorry. The words came before anything else. I nodded once. I know, silence settled between us. Not comfortable, honest. The neighborhood began waking around us. A newspaper landed somewhere across the street. A truck backed out of a driveway. Somebody started a lawnmower, even though it was too early for that kind of noise. Life kept moving whether families healed or not. Maya stared into the coffee. I didn't sleep. I noticed. I kept thinking maybe you would come outside. I almost did. She looked up. You did? I had my hand on the lock. Her shoulders shook. I'm sorry, she said again. I know saying it does not fix anything. No, I said. It does not. Several minutes passed before either of us spoke. Finally, Maya whispered, I never wanted to hurt you. I looked at her carefully. I believe that. She seemed surprised. You do? Yes. I took a sip of coffee. But not wanting to hurt somebody is not the same as choosing not to. She lowered her eyes. I was trying to keep the peace. I gave a small, tired smile. Between who? She did not answer. So I did. Between your father and people who had already decided he was not good enough. She flinched. It wasn't like that. No? She shook her head, but the motion had no strength in it. They kept making comments. I know. You know. I know more than you think. She looked genuinely confused. They said the truck looked embarrassing. I know. They said the tux would photograph better than your suit. I know. Camille kept saying people would notice. They did notice, I said. Maya covered her face with both hands. Oh, God. No, Maya. I leaned forward. They noticed yesterday because you agreed with them. She began crying again. Not loudly, quietly. The kind of crying that comes when excuses finally run out. After a long silence, I stood. I want to show you something. I went inside and returned with the folded speech. I wrote this almost 3 weeks ago, I said. I was going to read part of it at the reception. She took it like the paper might burn her. Read the beginning. Her voice trembled. My beautiful Maya, when your mother died, I did not know if I was strong enough to raise you by myself. Every morning, though, you would wake up, look at me, and say one word. Daddy, that one word gave me another reason to get out of bed. She stopped. I can't. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I looked out toward the street. I used to think the hardest day of my life was the day your mother died. But writing that speech taught me something. The hardest day is not always losing someone you love. Sometimes the hardest day is trusting that when you finally let them go, they will remember they were raised with love instead of pride and kindness instead of appearances. The paper shook in her hands. I didn't know, she whispered. No, I said. You didn't. A pickup truck pulled into my driveway. I recognized Vernon's dark blue Chevrolet before the engine stopped. Maya stood immediately. What is he doing here? Vernon climbed out wearing jeans and a polo shirt instead of the suit from the wedding. He looked like a man who had not slept much either. He walked up to the porch slowly. Lawrence. Morning. I'm sorry for coming without calling. It's all right. He turned toward Maya. I already apologized to your father. She swallowed. I know, but I have not spoken honestly to you. No one interrupted him. Vernon took a slow breath. Camille was wrong. Maya nodded through tears. I know. Terrence was wrong. She closed her eyes. I know. Then Vernon's voice grew firmer. But neither one of them held your phone. Maya's shoulders dropped. You did. She did not argue. You had every opportunity to tell Camille no. You had every opportunity to tell Terrence this was unacceptable. You had every opportunity to come to your father instead of sending that message. Tears rolled silently down her face. I know. Vernon looked toward me. I spent too many years choosing the quiet path in my own house, he said. I kept telling myself that avoiding conflict was the same thing as keeping peace. He shook his head. It is not. Then he looked back at Maya. Peace without courage is just surrender. The porch became very still. No one raised a voice. No one defended themselves. The truth did not need volume. It simply sat there with us in the morning sunlight. After a while, Vernon excused himself. Before leaving, he placed a hand on my shoulder. I hope one day she earns back what she lost. So do I said. He drove away. Maya remained standing on the porch, still holding the speech. Finally, she whispered, Dad? Yes. I know you love me. I do. She looked at me with the same frightened eyes she had after childhood nightmares. Can we go back? I thought about the little girl who once asked me to braid her hair, the teenager who hugged me after graduation, the woman who had sent me the cruelest message I had ever received. All three were standing in front of me. I love you, I said quietly. I always will. Hope flickered across her face, then I finished. But I will not be the place you come back to only after you have helped other people shame me. She closed her eyes, not because she disagreed, because she finally understood. For the first time in her life, love was not rescuing her. It was asking her to change. 4 months later, the leaves had begun turning in Columbus. The maples along my street traded summer green for amber and red, and the mornings carried enough chill to remind my knee that winter was waiting somewhere down the road. Life settled into something quieter. Not easier, just quieter. People often think healing arrives all at once, like flipping a light switch. It does not. For me, healing felt more like rewiring an old house. You replace one damaged line at a time, hoping the next room finally stops flickering. Maya and Terrence never had the wedding they planned. The ballroom reservation was canceled. The florist refunded part of the deposit. The photographer quietly mailed back the unused balance without anyone asking. Camille stayed angry for a while because anger was easier than shame. Vernon moved into the guest room for 3 weeks. That part Maya told me later, and I did not ask questions that were not mine to ask. For a while, Maya and Terrence stayed together, trying to convince themselves that surviving public embarrassment meant they were ready for marriage. It did not immediately. Without the pressure of a 200-person wedding, they began seeing things they had ignored before. Terrence admitted he had spent years avoiding hard conversations because disappointing his mother felt impossible. Maya admitted she had spent just as long believing acceptance from impressive people mattered more than honesty with the people who already loved her. Neither confession fixed anything overnight, but at least they had stopped lying to themselves. Several months later, they chose to have a small ceremony, immediate family only. No country club, no champagne wall, no perfect photographs arranged for strangers. A week before that ceremony, a card arrived in my mailbox. Inside was a handwritten note from Maya. Dad, I understand if you do not come. I have not earned that place back yet. I only wanted you to know this marriage will begin differently than the one we almost had. I read it twice. Then I picked up my pen. There was not much to say. Sometimes the shortest sentences carry the most weight. Build a marriage on courage, not image. I signed my name, nothing more. I did not attend the ceremony. Not because I wanted to punish her, because forgiveness and trust are not the same thing. She had asked for forgiveness. Trust still needed time. A few weeks later, my phone rang on a Sunday evening. Hi, Dad. Hi. Did you eat dinner? I did. What did you make? I smiled. You're only asking because you think I probably burned something. She laughed softly. I was thinking chili. You know me too well. The conversation lasted 8 minutes. Nothing important happened. We talked about football, the weather, and whether my tomatoes had survived the first frost. When we hung up, I realized something. She had not called because she needed money. She had not called because she needed advice. She had not called because she needed rescue. She had called to see how I was doing. It was a small thing, but real change usually starts small. After that, Sundays became our day. Not every week, but often enough. Sometimes she brought coffee from the little cafe near my neighborhood. Sometimes we watched a ball game. Sometimes we barely talked at all. One Saturday, she showed up wearing old jeans and work gloves. I brought paint, she said. I looked toward the backyard fence. You remembered. You said last spring it needed it. I did, she shrugged. Then let's stop talking about it. For the next 4 hours, we painted fence boards. The work reminded me of when she was a teenager helping me stain the deck, except this time there was not guilt hanging over every sentence. Just two people learning each other again. Around lunchtime, she wiped sweat from her forehead and laughed. I forgot how much work this is. I tried warning you. I thought you were exaggerating. I raised you, I said. I know exactly how stubborn you are. She grinned. I learned from somebody. Halfway through the afternoon, she looked toward my old Ford parked in the driveway. Can I borrow the truck? You sure? My car is in the shop. Keys are hanging by the back door. She came back 40 minutes later with lumber from the hardware store. After shutting off the engine, she sat behind the wheel for a moment before climbing out. Then she ran her hand across the faded hood. I used to think this truck was embarrassing. I leaned against the porch railing. I remember. She smiled sadly. It isn't embarrassing. No? It's just… She searched for the right word. Old, I laughed. That might be the nicest thing anybody has said about it in years. She laughed too. Then her expression softened. It got me everywhere I needed to go growing up. It did. I never thanked you for that. You do not have to. I do. She handed me the keys. I understand now. I also began changing. For years, almost every part of my identity had started with the words Maya's father. There was nothing wrong with loving my daughter. The problem was forgetting I existed outside that role. One Tuesday morning, Reverend Monroe from our church asked whether I would consider volunteering with a local trades program for teenagers. They need somebody who can teach basic electrical work, he said. I've never taught. He smiled. Lawrence, you have been teaching your whole life. So I said yes. Every Wednesday afternoon, I met with young men and women who wanted practical skills. Most had never held a wire stripper before. Some could not tell a breaker panel from a water heater. A few acted too cool to listen until they realized electricity does not care about attitude. One afternoon, a 16-year-old named Marcus looked at a switch box after I finished explaining it. I'll never be as good as you, he said. I handed him the screwdriver. You do not have to be. He frowned. What do you mean? You just have to be a little better than you were yesterday. He smiled. For some reason, saying those words helped me as much as they helped him. I was not only somebody's father anymore. I was Lawrence Freeman, retired electrician, teacher, neighbor, friend. There was still life left to live. Late one Sunday afternoon, Maya came over carrying 2 coffees. I found something, she said. She reached into her bag and carefully pulled out a folded stack of paper. My wedding speech. I found it tucked inside Mom's Bible. I nodded. I put it there. She looked at me carefully. I never finished reading it. You can. She unfolded the pages and read the final paragraph quietly. Wherever life takes you, never forget whose daughter you are. You were not raised by wealth. You were not raised by appearances. You were raised by a man who fixed broken things because giving up was never an option. If anyone ever makes you ashamed of where you came from, remember this. Your home was built with love long before it was ever filled with money. Her voice broke. She lowered the pages into her lap. I'm sorry it took me so long. I know. She reached over, not for a hug, just to hold my hand. This time I let her. We sat together on the porch while the sun slipped behind the trees. Neither of us needed to fill the silence. Some things do not heal because the right words are finally spoken. They heal because people begin living differently. I still wear Rochelle's wedding ring on the silver chain around my neck. I still drive the same old Ford. My knee still aches when rain is coming. Some parts of life never change. Others are worth waiting for. Children do not owe their parents perfect lives, but they do owe them basic respect. And if there is one thing I learned, it is this. Loving someone does not mean accepting every wound they give you. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for them and for yourself is finally draw a boundary.